We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Hezvav, volume 15, the fourth Sicha for the Parshas Vayetzei. In this Sicha, the Rebbe is going to explain that we find that Yaakov Avinu dealt with tzoin, and the Rebbe is going to explain the idea of tzoin represents bittul, and the Yidden are called sons to Hashem, and they're also called the tzoin, the sheep of Hashem, and they represent two levels of the level of Metzias, the level of Torah, the level of where the person is involved, and the tzoin represents the level of subjugation, the level of bittul, and the Rebbe will explain how we need both for both and why the various different psukim, what we find, what happened with the tzoin of Yaakov, that when he sent it to Esav over there, the tzoin comes later on, because when you're confronting an Esav, there can't be that level of bittul. There has to be the strength. In Avodas Hashem, we need to always remember to have Torah with bittul, but also bittul with strength, and both together, the combination. As we see in the Sikha. Let's look inside. Aleph. In der Heintiker Sedre, where der erzählt mit der größer Ariches, in today's Sedre, it relates with a great detail at length. The Yaakov Avinu Zayendig Beveis Lavan, as Yaakov, our father, while he was in the house of Lavan, hat sich besonders abgegeben mit Tzoin. He specifically devoted himself with sheep. He mainly preoccupied himself with the sheep. Sei sein Avodah dort is given als Roye Tzoin. Also, his service there, what did his work by Lavan? He worked as a shepherd of sheep. And also the payment, the reward that Lavan at the end paid him is given mitzvah. He gave him sheep. He worked with sheep and he got paid with sheep. Sheep was his payment. So we see that sheep had a major role in the avodah of Yaakov. Azoi, as ein iker rechush is given to the so that his main assets, his main fortune was sheep. Von dem is nis asher geworden. And that made him rich. From that, he became wealthy. And the man burst out, Yaakov burst out very, very much. And he had many sheep. Und durch dem Zoin hat euch gehabt ushvachis va'avodim ugamalim v'chamorim. And through the sheep, he also acquired. He sold the sheep, as Rashi says. He also had the maidservants and the male servants and camels and donkeys. The Rashi's mefarish, as Rashi explains, moicher tzoinoi bedomim yikorim. He would sell his sheep for lots of money, expensive, and then he would buy the servants, the maidservants, and the camels and the donkeys. So mainly it was tzoin, and with tzoin he would buy everything else. And yet we find something strange in the parsha when Yaakov was sending the gift to Esav. Over there, tzoin comes after shoir and the chamoy. Deswegen sagt man, yes, we see as in parshas by Yishlach, the portion of Yishlach by the shlichus for Yaakov to Esav. When Yaakov is sending a message to Esav, Yaakov. So over there, when we list the details of Yaakov's fortune, so over there, they're enumerated in the following order. First, he says, "Vayili shoir v'chamoir." Says that there was to me an ox and a donkey, and then he says, "Soin, sheep, ve'eved v'shivcha," and male and female servants. Good. Over there is soin noch shoir v'chamoir. Soin is listed after listing first the ox and the donkey. It doesn't mention Soin as the first, the beginning, and his main acquisition, what he really owned. Befrat, as es is euch nicht wie früher. When facing Esav, it is also does not in the same order as the Torah describes as Yaakov was running away from Lavan. When the pasuk that said the Yaakov is at love from Lavan, when the pasuk relates how Yaakov escaped from Lavan right before encountering Esav, was a state over there. It says Vayinahig, he led the animal. So it's free at first. It says it's called Mikneu, all of his cattle, the sheep. And only afterwards, his fortune and what he bought with his fortune, which is the Shoyn and the Chamer, as Rashi said, he bought all this. So over here, there is the reverse order. So why is Soin mentioned over here after Shoyn and Chamer? And the Rebbe will explain later that since Soin represents the level of Bittul, but confronting Esav, he didn't list Soin first because over there was necessary, not that level of Soin, as we'll see inside later on. Base. So this was a story that took place with Yaakov, this physical story that we read in the Chumash, but every story in the Chumash also has the lesson and the meaning and how we apply it to our service of Hashem. Every aspect of Torah is is an internal lesson for every Jew in every place and every time. Especially when we talk about the actions of our forefathers, which are related in Torah, that they are an eternal lesson for us. And how much more so? We're talking about a subject matter, an inyan, was vernemt kimat a ganze sedra, a subject matter which takes up almost an entire sedra, the portion of Vayetzei talks about all the sheep with Yaakov gave to Esav, so that this has to be Vozainen similar bonim. This is a sign for the sons, and a sinas koyach to the avodah for the bonim. This is giving a strength, a power, what happened to the forefathers, to the service of the children. Maisa ovis siman lebonim. Sign for the sons. Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We are the sons of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So what happens to Yaakov is an asinas koyach for us as well, or diin. The fun is verstandig. So from this we understand, as the protim anal in Yaakov vernehmen sich mit Zoin, that the above mentions details that Yaakov occupied himself with sheep. So what are the details over here? How are we going to apply it as a lesson to the children? So what are the three details that we're talking about here? Number one, Aleph, as dafke Zoinom gebracht der Vayifretze Ishmael, that it was the sheep that brought to Yaakov bursting out very much. It's the sheep that brought him to that level. Soin, the level of Soin, brings to Vayifretz Ishmael. Number two, Li'idoch, on the other hand, we say, while Chochas Soin is given Iker Choshe, although that was his main assets, was sheep, but yet he exchanged a part of his sheep to acquire maidservants, male servants, camels, and donkeys. He didn't just hold on to the sheep, but he actually expanded it by purchasing some of the other items, the shvachas, avodim, umal, mechamerim. And number three, in sein Shlichus to Esav, but is his mission when he sent the Malachim to go counter Esau, he told them, he mentioned the Tzoin after saying Shor V'Chamoir. So these details are in the spiritual service of every Yid. So to understand these details, we'll understand it by from the importance, but to get an idea, we have to first understand what is Tzoin. And for that, the Rebbe is going to bring down the medrash that the Yidden are referred to as the Tzoin of Hashem and also the children of Hashem. So what does these two things mean? Gimel, but man das verstehen, behagdim, we'll understand it by introducing what steht in Medrash. It says in the Medrash, wegen dem Verbund zwischen ihm mit Neibischen, about the connection between Yidden and Hashem. It says, Hu li la'av, Hashem is to me a father, Vani loy leben, and I'm to him as a son. Then further it says, Hu li l'roya, he is to me as a shepherd, Vani loy l'tzoyin, and I'm to him as a sheep. Is Yadua, the shailin them. So that's what the Medrash says. So the question is known. Since Yidden are like a son to Hashem, so what could add more to that, that they're also sheep? We already said they're a son. So what is added by saying that they're sheep? The contrary. What kind of a comparison, if you want to compare relationship, how much the tzoin are dear to a shepherd, legabe de chavives, if you want to measure it relative to how precious and dear fun ben by Zainav, by his father. Of course, there's no comparison there. So if we're saying already that Hashem is our father and we're Hashem's children, why are we saying after that Hashem is our shepherd and we're his sheep? State of them the biur. So the explanation, what is written about it, as that is actually the reason because it's a much lesser degree. That's why there's a much less of a connection really there, much less of an entity. In a way, that is actually an advantage. Das was merufton Eden b'shem bonim. Why are Yidden called sons? Vice that points as a zayin ametzias lagabe demav, that they are an entity relative to the father. They are a child. The Meibishter, that there is Hashem and there is a child. They are the children. Now, the relationship as a child of Hashem is not the same as the relationship of a physical child with a father, because a child and a father are two separate entities, and the neshama with Hashem are really united. But still, when we use the term son, that means you're saying there's an entity there. Una'afal pi, as der Verbund von einer Neshama mit Neibishten, that the connection from a soul with Hashem is nit via ben lemato. It's not the same as a son below. A child turned into an entity by himself. He's not one with the father. From the Av. He's an independent of the Av. Nor the neshama, but by Hashem, when we talk about the soul with Hashem, it's not the same way. There's no new entity of a neshama. Nor the neshama is kul achad with Neibishter. It's all one with Hashem. It does not separate it from him, blessed at all. So, Av is not, and Ben is not really a Metzias like an Av and a Ben in the physical sense, but yet, just the fact that you call him a Ben is the chober that etzem toyar Ben. When you describe a son, you say he's a son. Abavais, that is evidence. It says if it is something, a second, another existence. Nidder Av is not the father. Saying the word Ben means a son, it's not Av. Sein Metzias v'chavivus, therefore his existence and his dearness, the love of the father to the son, hot an erech utvisis mokem beim Av. It has a relationship, and it is something which takes up space by the father. The father loves his son. His son is an entity, takes up space because it's his son. That's an Av and a Ben. This concept that the son is an entity relative to Hashem, that's only v'dos kemen zogun nor legabi dem oire lekifo seder ha'ishtalshlus. That you can only say about the godly light which comes in the order of the evolution in the Mali Kolam. That light is a root and a source for the created being. Und therefore, seinen sie dort tefes mokem, and that's why they take up space over there. Because next to Ishtalshulus, there is an entity, there is a Ben. But relative to the godly light which is beyond the evolution, beyond Ishtalshulus, is Gam Ben Ve'echen, as it says in Koheles, he doesn't have a son, it doesn't have a brother, which means relative to that higher level, there's no such thing as a son and a brother. As is Nitshayich zu sagen, as is do welches is Metzias Oyserim, it does not fit, it doesn't apply to say that there's any existence outside of Hashem. Relative to the level of Bligvul, there is no Ben, there's no son there, there's nothing else. Im, relative to the Bligvul, level to the level which is higher than Ishtalshus, so that the Yidden and their special dearness, they are equated to sheep. And that's why it's on the contrary, because it's a higher level, they're a non-entity. And they're equated to tzoy. Their mitzias, the oich, their chavivus, their existence, and having them there, the sheep next to the shepherd, a totally different world. Does not have any relationship, does not have any value next to the Raya. The Tzoyin and the Raya are two different worlds, so there is no connection. But that means, but on the other hand, while the Yidden, mitzad, the level of Sovev, level which is higher in the world, higher than Ishtalshus, are not really valued as an entity. But on the other hand, is those gufa b'vayzer goydel ha'ilufunidim. That itself is evident to the great advantage of the as oich in der darge fun elikus, that also in the step and the level of godliness, bus is nitoke nesinas mokom der mitzias from the where there is no room for an entity of any creation next to the Ein Sof, which is the level as said from the pasuk of Kehelas, Gam Ben Ve'och Ein Loi, no son, no brother. Oich Dorten is do the Chavivus Sid. Also there is a dearness. Yidden are dear even relative to the highest level of the Ein Sof. That's why we call them Tzoyin. But what is the Chavivus? It's not because of being an entity, it's a Chavivus because of their bittul. Nor the Chavivus Zeira, that dearness is not mitzad zeir mitzias. It's not because of their entity, nor farker. Mitzad zeir, but on the other hand, opposite, just the opposite. Mitzad zeir oitzam habitl zum Eibushu, because of the powerful subjugation, self-negation to Hashem. That's their existence is their not existence, their subjugation. Was davke der bittel is a keli to Kishel Milo. Specifically, that bittel is the vessel to the godly light Shalamayla Mishtalsus, which is beyond the Hishtalsus. Although I am exalted, I'm holy, and I dwell in holiness, but somebody who is downridden and humble of spirit, that's where I rest. So the existence of Hashem in the highest level, we get through the level of Bittul, which is example by the level of Tzoy. Der Inyan, der Oitzma Bittul, and also this idea, that tremendous, powerful Bittul, is merumas in them was Eden seinen Geglichen zu Tzoy. That is hinted in the fact that the Yidden have been compared to sheep. Warum v'mizet b'muchash, as you see in actuality, is in tzoin do the teva habitl, that in sheep, the nature of self-negation, of subjugation, it's more than by other behemoths. An animal, some animals are more subjugated, but the less subjugated, but the tzoin is fully subjugated, as follows, does what the shepherd, the master. So that represents a tremendous level, a powerful level of bittul. That is represented by the level of tzoy. So Ben represents the level of milus, mitzias, that there is greatness there, existence, and Soin represents the advantage of non-mitzias of bittul. And now the Rebbe is going to explain those are the service either with Tam Vadas or the service of bittul. Dalet, the Tzvei Toyarim from Eden. These two descriptions of the Yidden, Ben and Soin, a son and sheep, they hint to two types of services in the service of man. Chinas Ben is the avodah for libud haTorah. The level of son is the service of studying Torah, Torah study. But ikra, the main thing of Torah study is the avona v'hasoga shebemoach, is understanding, and that your brain, your mind grasps. That's what Torah is. In welchem that Adam haloimet filzikal sametzias, in which the person who is studying feels himself as an entity. Nimmt Torah durch sein Verstand. He takes Torah through his understanding. He is the entity who studies and understands Torah. Now, we also need to have the level of subjugation in order to have the proper understanding. And although in order for him when he's studying, that he should come up and have his mind direct him to the true meaning of the Torah, so that what he's learning, that he knows, and his mind is mekaven to the truth of Torah, to Chochmos Baruch, which is his blessed wisdom. In order to do that, Mutterstein in Atnua, he has to be in a movement from bittul. He has to have subjugation. As we say in the davening, my soul will be like dust to everybody. Then the pasuk that says in the tefillah, ken zayin psach libi b'seh. Then you open up my heart in your Torah. What can you do, as it's known also in the matter of Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, that they had to make the bracha first. The Gemara says of the haaretz, because they didn't make the bracha, meaning they were studying Torah. If you just study Torah, you don't make the bracha, which means you don't appreciate the Neisen HaTorah. You don't have the subjugation to Hashem. Is of the haaretz, there was the destruction. of the Beis Hamikdash because of that. But you have to have the Pesach Liba, you have to have it based upon Nafshi Kofar like Tegoltia, make the bracha, Tchila. But still, that's the basis. Is thus nervous der bittel is a yisoid v'agdama to limud Torah. That subjugation is a foundation and an introduction to the study of Torah. Aber the limud Torah gufa, but the actual study of Torah is doch nit mit bittel. You don't study Torah with subjugation. Nor verkehrt. The contrary. You have to use your power of intellect. So a ben represents the level of chokhmah, of learning Torah with understanding, with wisdom and metzias. On the other hand, we have tzoin. Tzoin weist of the Avodah from Birurim. Tzoin points to the service of sorting things out. Tzoin is from Lashon Yitzia. Tzoin comes from Lashon exiting, aroisking, to go out. To go out from the Daled Amos Shel Torah, from the 4 cubits of Torah, and to occupy yourself with matters of the world, to make of them a dwelling place to Hashem and the world below. Und dafke die Avodah bringt Arois dem Emerson Bittel von Ayiden zum Ebersten. This Avodah, the Avodah of going out of the 4 cubits of Torah, that expresses, that brings out the true subjugation from a Yid to Hashem, to the Meibushin. The Yitzia, Soin for Zayin Yitzias, when you go out from your existence, from yourself. Warum? Das is a Avodah, was a Yid tut sie nicht zu lieb sich. That is a service. You're not doing it for yourself. Learning Torah, you gain an advantage. You gain greatness. So you're building yourself through Torah. But when you go out, Avodah Zabirurim, it's not building yourself. It's an Avodah Vasa'it tut sie nicht zu lieb sich. It's a service that you're not doing it for yourself. So Zayin Shleimus and Aliyah, so that you get elevation and you get wholesomeness from that Avodah. Warum Adrab? Because the contrary. That etzem farnemen sich mit inyone ha'olam. Thus, the fact alone that you have to deal and occupy yourself with worldly matters is a yerida for him. That's a descent for him. Darf mafsik sein von limud Torah. He needs to interrupt his study of Torah. In welchen seinen hereingetan seine hechere und edelere in which he invested his upper, higher, and more refined powers of the soul, using his intellect, using his brains in the study of Torah. So he has to stop that. So he has to go out and to occupy himself with matters of action. And why does he do that? Nor blois kidei zu ausführen dem obersten Kavanah, just so that you can fulfill and accomplish the intent of Hashem, to make for him a dwelling place in the worlds below. So that is the level of bittul. That's the level of tzoin. That's the level of expression of non-self by leaving and going away from your own elevations, Torah, to go out and do the kavon elyoina of birurim. Hey, so now we understand also the 2 periods that Tzoin Lavan that was in the portion in where he was working. We have it the portion of Toldos, and then we have it in Vayetzei. One was the level of more like a ben, and then the other one like a never. Let's look inside. Hey, so with this we can understand the connection, the knot, the tie. How is that from Inyan Hatzoin So Avodah Shel Yaakov b'Beis Lavan, the idea of the sheep and Yaakov's service in the house of Lavan. Der Chilik zwischen Avodas Yaakov in dem Zman wegen welches redt sich in Parshas Toldos und Avodas wie sie wird herausgebracht in Parshas Vayetzei. What is the difference between Yaakov's work during the time which we discuss, in which we relate in the portion of Toldos, and the work of Yaakov as it is expressed and brought out in the portion of Vayetzei? In Parshas Toldos redt sich wegen der Zeit, was Avodas Yaakov is given by Bechinas Ben. In the portion of Toldos, over there we're discussing the time that Yaakov's service, Avodah, was in the level of Ben. Over there it says, "V'Yaakov ish tom yoshev v'holim." He would be a innocent, simple person sitting in the tents, which are holim. The tents, plural. Rashi says, "Olei shel Shem, olei shel Ever," the tents of Shem and Ever. Und euch v'soif hasedra, and also in the end of the portion, was werder erzählt as Yaakov hat gemusst hat leben Beis Aviv, that it relates as Yaakov had to run away from his father's home. Is a nitavek from home, so he did not leave. He didn't go away from the tent of Torah. But Adrabah, we know that before he went to Choron, is Nitman b'Beis Ever Yudal Shana. He hid in the house of Ever, in the yeshiva of Ever, for 14 years, and don't let Torah study Torah. So that was in Parshas Toldos. It was Yaakov like a Ben. Parshas Vayetzei. However, when we come to the portion of Vayetzei, Vayetzei wegen dem wie Vayetzei Yaakov, as Yaakov left, is arois for the Daled Amos of Torah. He left the 4 cubits of Torah and his Ongekumen King Chorin. He came to Chorin, which is Charein Af Shel Mokem Ba'ilam. That is the place of Hashem's anger in the world. That's called Choron Charein Af, meaning it was a very bad, low place. He left the world of Torah to go into a place like Choron. In Beis Lavan Arami, in the house of Laman the Arami, und dort hat gearbeitet als Rev und Sohn Lavan, and there he worked as a shepherd of Lavan's sheep. Also literally. So, not only in a spiritual level of this said, but he actually stopped learning Torah, and he had to actually work, and he worked with the Tzon Lavan. Kipshutai. The Pasuk says that he said, I worked with Lavan with all my might. These I'm learned up from Yaakov and Vazoi Apoyel darf arbeiten for sein Balabais. We, to the extent he worked there, and he was a worker there, so that we learn from Yaakov the extent how a worker must work on his day's work for his owner, for the master who hired him, because as Yaakov said, I worked with all my strength, and that's the lesson for every worker. So we see that Yaakov turned into a worker, say, from his level of Torah. Davke, the Avodah was specifically this service, as nit cook and the them goydel ha'helam v'hester, notwithstanding the great obscurity and block. The Beis Lavan, in the house of Lavan, is Yaakov did this geworden. Yaakov did not become affected. Unim Lavan Rosh Garti, I lived together with this evil Lavan. But I kept the 613 mitzvahs. Hat dort, as brought down in Rashi, hat dort aufgestellt the Shvatim, and he raised over there, he set up the tribes over there, which are Shifta Yudke, the tribe of Hashem, in a way that his bed is complete, which means that all of his children were righteous. So the Avodah hat gebracht dem Tachlis Hamittel von Yaakov. that service that he did in love, and that brought out his total subjugation. Total subjugation. He worked with the tzayin, and this is to make a deal. This was the will of Hashem, and that's all. Non-mitzi is a level of bitli. Ashloima dos is the tam panimi. So we can say that this is the inner reasoning. Was the iker von rechush was Yaakov had verdient, that the main possessions, main assets that Yaakov earned, mitgenommen from Beis Lavan, and he took along from the house of Lavan, is given Tzoin Dapke, was specifically Tzoin. While in Tzoin is Merubas der Ilu Ruchnis, zu welchen ist zugekommen, durch Abidosuk is Lavan, because in Tzoin is hinted this spiritual elevation to which he reached through his service in the house of Lavan, the Inyan HaBittel Canal, the aspect from Bittel. He took along Tzoin, he took along Bittel, because when coming to Lavan, what he got was they expressed his total Bittel to Hashem by working with his Tzoin, and that's why he took along the Tzoin. That was his main fortune, because that is what he took from the house of Lavan. Und das ist euch der Diuk Haloshen. This is also the precise language by Yifroitz the man burst out very much. The bursting out means bursting out from the world of Ishtalshlus, of evolution, to the world of higher than Ishtalshlus. From Loshen Peretz together, from the language by Yifritz comes breaching through the fences. Baldur Bittel Tzoin, because through the level of Bittel, which is the level of Tzoin, is men poiretz the gedorim from seder yishtalshlus. We burst through the boundaries of the order of the yishtalshlus, of the orderly way. Men kum zu zum eure ki, and you come to the godly light. Was hot nit kein agbolus. Doesn't have any limitation. That's why ma'oid, base ma'oid. That means without a limitation. And that took place through the level of Bittel. And the Rebbe brings down, bis wie Chassidus touched up the psukim, as Chassidus translate the verses, the hechlif es maskorti aseres moinim. This seems to be negative, that Lavan switched around my pay 10 times. 10 times 10, each moinim is 10. Aseres moinim is 10 times 10, 100 times. As the Pasuk says, if he said the kudim, then he gave akudim, the dotted ones, or the ones that had the stripes. But in Chassidus, it says lemal that to change the reward is actually in an advantage way. That's what Chassidus translates. As Yaakov ba'avidosei, that Yaakov in his service of Mamshir given, he brought down the essence of the wishes of the Maitzil, was his hecher von his chalkus v'tzir, which is higher, which is above any separation, any form. Und der Fahr hat sein Schar gekannt, das Challe werden von ein Zir zum Zweiten. And that's why his reward was able to be changed from one shape to the other one, because he reached into a level which is higher than shape, and that level that was ma'oid. And so that is vehichlif, to be able to change it around in a way, because you're connected with a place which is beyond any formation. So now we see that while Yaakov was in the level of a ben, he still needed to reach the level of Tzoin, the level of Bittel, Moed, Vayifritz. But the same thing is otherwise true as well. You can't be just a Ben, just Bittel, and not have the level of Ben. Shame, Ben. Just as in the service of Ben, which the idea of a son is that you take it with understanding and grasping, which is Metzias, an entity. Must also be the level of Bittel. Kinal Sivdalet, I said earlier, Sivdalet, we know that you need, besides what we just learned before, but the Rebbe said in Sivdalet that learning there has to be the level of Baruch B'Torah Tchila. So, you can't just have learning, you need the level of bittul. Kinal Sivdalet. But the other way is also true, the same thing. As in the Avodah von Tzoin, that in the service of Tzoin, was Ikra is Bittel. And when you do the Avodah from the level of Bittel, Muzun Zayin, the Peulas von alle Koiches and Nefesh. There must also be the effects, the activities of all the powers of its soul. Zayin Metzias, your Metzias. You can't just be Bittel, you must also have the Metzias of all the powers of the soul. Mit Bittel v'Shiflus allein kemen nit loichem sein kegen dem Helem v'Hester Oilem. Just with subjugation and low spirit, Shiflus alone, you cannot wage war against the Helem v'Hester Oilem, against the blockage and the obscurity of the world. It must be as the lesson instruction is in the very first of the 4 portions of the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, that you have to be as kanomer, got to be bold like a leopard, gibber kari, strong like a lion, not bittel but strength. As medarf nutzen the mitas avzus, you need to use the measure of boldness, not to be ashamed from those people which make fun or laugh at you. On the midas hagavura, you have to use the measure of strength, this gabir al yitzrei, to overpower your inclination, lenatzchei, to win him, ki gibur hamis gabir al soinei, just like a powerful person who is overpowering his enemy, to win him, in order to throw him to the ground. You have to use Gevurah to throw down your Yetzer Hara. So you can't just be bittul. You can't fight with bittul. You need to be the azkanam. You need the kibbutz. But over here you need to caution. That should be done, that gevura and that boldness should be done as a result from his subjugation to Hashem's supreme will. If the gevura is mitzad sein eigener yeshus, if his strength comes because of his own self sense and feeling, is so that noisef of them. So besides the fact, the Rebbe says in the parentheses, was when means loichem mit toike from the eigener mitzias, when you wage war with the strength of your own existence, your own being, you don't know for sure who will be victorious in the war. Says Meglach, it's possible as der Tzaddik and Neged hat in sich merer von dem Suga as Starkheit. Maybe the other side has, the opposing side has in themselves more of this category of boldness and strength that you have. So we don't know. So that's number one. If you're going with your personal strength, not Hashem's strength, then we don't know. But besides that, is those Heipach HaGedusha. This is to use boldness and strength not in the proper way. That's opposite of Kedusha. Such a kind of a conduct cannot be a correct support in Zayin Milchama mit Maligim u'menagdim l'Torah mitzvahs, with his war that he needs to wage with those who make fun or those who oppose Torah and mitzvahs, with his own strength, with his own chutzpah, with his own boldness, with his own gevura. That wouldn't work. So we need that the boldness should be a result at Titzah, the gevura at Titzah from the middle. Only when he conducts himself so, only was Azoyot in Torah geheißen, that is the Torah commanded him. Dann is those the Azus of Gebura was his menatzeach dem menaged. Then that becomes the boldness and the strength which wins the opponent. But that's because of the Torah told him. That is because the bittul he gets because of doing Hashem's will, not because it's an expansion of his own mitzias, that he is a gevura and bold. Yeshloimar, and there is said this their tam pnimi. This could also the inner reason was their tur. In the tur, Nazoich the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe in his table in his Shulchan Aruch bringt euch dem Namen from the Bal HaMaimer. They also bring the author who said this as kanomer, who said bold like a leper, Yehuda ben Tema. They tell you right away is Yehuda. The kum zu meramezayin. This is coming to hint as the hero from as kanomer chulu. This lesson to be bold like a leopard is an hoger uya. It is only a proper conduct when it comes from Yehuda ben Tema, when it comes from Yehuda ben Tema. Yehuda miloshen heidah. Yehuda comes from the level of admitting and subjugation. Heidah bittul. And subjugation is not maspik as der bittul soll sein belois via hagdoma betchilus ha'avodah. It is not sufficient still ben Tema. It's not that this should only be a introduction before you start the avodah. You have bittul, and then you go with your mitzias. Nor the Yehuda dav sein ben Tema. It has to be the bittul dav zich nochanan da rejog, the son of saying. You have to constantly express this idea as in the anhoga von Askanomir, that in this bold like a leopard, it's as a result of Yehuda ben Tema constantly bittul. Or mibaldas mistate in the tnua von Azus Gevura, since you are standing in that type of a movement of boldness and strength, so kemen that I'm found Porsche der Azus von Yeshus. So that could, you might fall in from that in very literally bold and self existence, Yeshus being an entity, God forbid, because you're being bold. But if you're not bold in the Yehuda ben Tema style, that bittul constantly, then the boldness you can fall into become bold will become from the level of Yeshus. And now the Rebbe goes to explain these the tzoyin with Lavan, with Yaakov. Yaakov's tzoyin. Zayin. Those is the beer in the Protmanal. This is the explanation, the details of above in Sif Aleph Beis. The specifics, why it's mentioned, he only worked with Soin, and then he doesn't mention it by Esav in the beginning, and he bought with the Soin the other items. So this will explain it. The Rebbe says like this: Afal pi as klolus avidosu rechusha is given Soin, even though his general service and his assets, his acquisitions were sheep, was bittul kinal, so I mean that they were subjugation, as mentioned before. He was not satisfied with that. But he actually included in his fortune maidservants and male servants. He had soin, but he changed it brought in these other items. Because in order to properly accomplish the service of the sorting out, especially later on to also sorting out of Esav, in addition to Lavan, In Choron over there is eine Neutik alle verschiedene Prote befane Avodah. Over there, it's important to use all the details and types of Avodah. Merumas in the Inyonim Hanal, which are hinted in the above matters, the Avodas that he bought and that he worked with them. But in them seinen dort zwei Bavonish. But there's two cautions over here. You're going to do other things, not just bittul. But the bittul has to be the main. Everything else comes as a result from the bittul. Aleph. The agdolos harechush midipratim nesofim. When you increase your fortune and you add in the additional details, hat Yaakov König gewen mit und durch dem Umbeit von dem Zoin. Yaakov acquired it through and the exchange of the sheep. They did not come as a service for themselves. The other things, they didn't come. They didn't come as a service, so they came as an exchange. Not else saw, they came as a result from avodas habitl, from the subjugation, the service of subjugation. They were exchanged from the tzayin into this other proto avodah base. Oich noch them, that also afterwards, even he acquired the other proto avodah, but the nit verkauft dem ganzen tzayin. He did not sell all the sheep, mit andere kinyonim, and exchange it with other acquisition. But on the contrary, the tzayin is damot geblieben iker chushik. Also, then the tzayin remained his main fortune. That was his main assets. Warum euch wenn is reingetan? Warum euch wenn is reingetan in der Milchama mit hellem Esther Oilem? Was also when you are invested and you're in the war with the obscurity and the blockage of the world, was further taken which demands force and strength. Muss bleiben der Hergesh habit lavinyan ikre. So the feeling of bittul needs to be a main aspect. So that's why these two protim, that first of all, that you do buy with soin other things, you have to increase. You can't just remain with bittul. But yet, he still kept his soin, still kept that bittul. Because while you're invested in all the other wars, but you need the other tools and the other acquisitions, but still it always has to be based on continuously that Yehuda ben Tema, always a level of it. Ches. Verstandig was in the Shlichus to Esav. Now we also understand, according to this, that why, when he sent the mission to Esav, werd der Prat von Zoin nicht gestellt als erster. This detail of sheep is not placed as the first one from the Oisgerechente Prote Rechush, from those enumerated details of his fortune. Notwithstanding that was his main rechush, and yet the Torah doesn't mention it. The Rebbe pointed out before, because mitten zogen vayihi li shor v'chamorim soin ve'eved shivcha. Yaakov says, I had the ox, the donkey, and the sheep, and the servant, the male and the female servant. But Yaakov gewollt der Mann des Chuyas. Yaakov wanted to mention the merits of Koiches Nailim and these great powers, the elevated powers, those Velnim Beistein, that are going to will stand by him, will protect Yaakov. When they're mit aufschrecken Esav, that way they will scare away Esav from Sultan was Esav had gewollt from Esav doing that what he wished to do. The river, and therefore, hat nit magdim given the prat von Zoin. He did not bring first the detail of sheep. That points to the nature of subjugation and this humility and lowness and subduing. Because in order to scare away Esav, so Esav needs to mainly, und zum allermeisten, the very first, the Herren, the Teke von Yaakov. He must hear the force of Yaakov. He should know, as by Yaakov is dot soin, that Yaakov has sheep. The says he also tells him about the soin, that there is a subjugation. But Mele is ein Teke nit kenegen, and therefore the strength with which he's coming is not his own. Nor is that taken to Kedusha. That's a strength of Kedusha. So that the Shoyer v'chamoyer that come first are because there is tzayin. But what do you scare Esav is mitaken? This is aber nor benigeya. This is, however, only as it relates to them was their tzat connected after heaven to what the opposite side needs to hear. But for zich allein, but for you oneself, darf man wissen und gedenken, we need to know and remember the memes, the truth. As their toikef is at the tzov from bittul, that your force is a result of the bittul. The main fortune of a yid is the level of sheep. Even Esav needs to know that it's based on, let's say, it's a take it from the Abish. But him, you have to show strength. But a yid needs to know that his main rechush is soin, and the strength comes from the level of it. Test. What's the very simple lesson? All the above in our generation is there has to be the order of service of like Yaakov to go out Vayetzei. To go out and make the world, give the world light. First, you need, and you must have first the preparation from Limud HaTorah Ba'ol Shem Ever, in the study of Torah in the tents of Shem and Ever. But you need to, however, reach to come to the level of Moed, level of Blik Bull, which is Milus Oraj Kivshua, fill the land and conquer it. Muzman Narois gain in Eretz, you must go out into the land. Developed, and you occupy yourselves with illuminating the world. And the contrary, during these dark times, the hills of Mashiach is the Iker Havoida Dafke in Asiya. Now the main service of a Yid is doing in action. As opposed to the time of the Talmud, when it is given in Talmud Torah, then the main thing was learning Torah. Then the main avodah was Talmud Torah. Al derech de psagdin in Shulchan Aruch, similar to the ruling of the Allah in the Shulchan Aruch, as heintige Zeiten is nitod the Metzias, that during nowadays there doesn't exist the Metzias from Tarosium Nosenu, that Torah is our craft, a special category of a person devoted fully to Torah, then Torah becomes an umnus, as the dargah from Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Chaverev, that was the level of Rav Shimon Yochai and his friends. I feel it by me, then even a minority can say about, there's not such a thing as Torah being their crafts. The main service nowadays is in doing the act of tzedakah. Especially in our generation. This occupation. So Eden was blungen to search and find Yidden that are lost in Choshech HaGolus, in the darkness of the exile, and to place them in the corner of light from their mitzvah of the Torah. The light, because the mitzvah is the lamp and the Torah is the light, to take them from their lost, and they lost their way, and bring them into the light. So mainly today, it's not so much in Eifton to Machem, to take somebody who is ignorant and make him into a scholar, to make somebody who's less learned to a greater learner, somebody who's lenient in mitzvahs, to turn them into a totally Yerei Shamayim, but in the minyan for Natzolas, Nefoshes Mamish, but mainly today is saving lives, Mamish saving. And is Matzil the Nefesh from the Eden Ubon of Chulu. You save the soul of this Jew and all of his and his children, and the Setra Tzev Kol HaDeiros to the end of all generation. as his own bleiben Eden, they should remain Jewish. Fühlen sich, and they should conduct themselves. We start at least in action. The way a Jew must conduct himself. So that is today the Hara of Vayetzei. You got to go out. Got to go out and find a lost Jew and bring him back, and all of the generation that will follow him. Yud. In them. There's another point in this. In order that it should be with great success, it must be done in a way of self-negation, subjugation. You need to do this in order to accomplish the mission from Hashem to illuminate the darkness of the goals. When you do this service from subjugation, then it's not measured based on the measurement and limitation of nature and what's tasty for you. Doesn't make a big difference to him. For him, that where God sends you. In any place and situation where the divine supreme leads you. And with every category of Jews with which you come in connection with. He puts himself in with all of his energies, with all of his strength, take him in the full force. So to raise many students. The beyond limitation, beyond measure and limitation, in such a way that the man burst out very, very much. When you go with this idea, as that you need to accomplish the mission of Hashem. Then you are successful with all categories of students. He says Nekudim or Nekudim is all of the sheep give birth. All the students grow up properly, as they should. And even more than just Kideboy, they will be fruitful and they multiplied more than other sheep. His bed is whole, which means in the Tokin Teifich has Visholim, in Bon of Talmidov, there is nothing wrong at all, God forbid, in his sons and his children. When you go with this level, with a level of bittul, doing the Ratzin Hashem, then your success is beyond. And those great Zu Yedin, Eden, and Ali Eden, this prepares every Jew and all Jews. So the Geula Amitis Vashlema, to the true and complete redemption. Was der Geula that can only did like in Golos. This Geula, not one Jew will remain in Golos. The Yud as the promise, Atem to look to Echad B'nai Yisrael. You will be collected one B'nai Yisrael. Kol Godel Yeshuva Heina B'Korev Mamish. A great community will return here very soon. This is Mesichas Yud Kislev Tov Shin Lamed Vav.